Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, a rookie review episode of the program, and a very exciting topic that we have here to talk about. Myself, Trevor Sikkema, and Jon Ledyard here with you guys to, in interesting timing, redraft the 2024 NFL draft. And we're so excited about this one. This is going to be a lot of fun. We won't have time to get to all of the players, so we're going to get to the top 20. We're not going to do the full first round. I'm sorry for the teams that are in the playoffs. I'm sorry, but we're trying to keep this show within an hour, so we're going to do the top 20. We're going to redraft the top 20 with so many things to think about, John. What we thought about these guys pre-draft, a little sneak peek into how they've played in their rookie seasons, team needs and team scenarios have traded a little bit, so there's a little bit of a hindsight advantage. How much are we going to go, well, at the time this team did this versus like, well, okay, how it played out, clearly they could have used this. Normally, we wait to do redrafts until, like 2-3 years down the line because we want to see how these players really develop. Nah, we're getting right to it. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some chaos here, and we're going to redraft the 2024 NFL draft 14 weeks into the NFL season. How you doing, my friend? You ready for this adventure?
I'm very ready, and you gave me the first overall picks, so I know you did this so that you didn't have to face the music.
No, whoa.
Maybe because you didn't have the spine to take Bo Nix first overall.
You're right. I did it so I don't take Bo Nix at 1. I take Bo Nix at 2, of course, because the Commanders still needed a quarterback, so that one doesn't look nearly as bad. No, I genuinely was like, all right, well, I'm hosting the show, so it'd be easier to just set John up, be like, John, who are you going to take with the number 1 pick? So that's actually what I did. And I didn't even think about it to myself because I feel like there's kind of like a clear number 1 pick, but I'm interested to see. I mean, if you go the opposite direction,
I think I am going to go the opposite direction because this is not, at least to me, this is not a clear number 1 pick. Man, there's been a lot of back and forth with this quarterback class already. Bo Nix started off slow. Caleb Williams has been all over the place. Jayden Daniels has been steady, and then it's dipped a little bit lately. Is that his fault? He got injured. Is that part of the injury part of it? I feel like, we haven't even mentioned Drake Maye. The situation's so bad there. I'm not sure that we can see, if we see him on the same level as these other guys, he could be better than them. I think my overall takeaway on this quarterback class is while we certainly know that Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix have been the best 2 quarterbacks this season, I do not feel like watching this class that we are much closer to figuring out who the actual best quarterback from this class will be. And that's actually kind of exciting because I think we will go into year 2, and I think we will have a pretty great race between maybe 4, maybe 5 guys. We'll see if McCarthy and Penix can get in this, maybe 6 guys for who's going to be the best quarterback in this class. 4 of the 6 from the first round have played this season, really. Penix has barely played. And all 4, I think the door is still open for them to finish in any order in terms of who ends up becoming the best in this class. So because of that, I am reverting to my priors. I'm going back to my pre-draft board. I'm still believing in Caleb Williams as the number 1 overall pick to the Chicago Bears, and I am staying dry and boring and keeping Bears fans off my back, I think at least, and taking Caleb Williams first overall in a very hopefully non-controversial cowardly pick.
So, okay, you're right. This is much closer than I think I would have indicated. This is not the direction that I would have gone, though. I would have taken Jayden Daniels here at number 1 overall.
I thought you were going to say that.
I would have taken.
Well, why would you? Explain why.
So the reason why it's absolutely not the fact that I'm out on Caleb Williams. The situation, certainly with the coaching staff in Chicago, the way that it has played out this year, Caleb was not going to. He was not going to be in an environment where he was really going to be able to hit the ground running. He wasn't, and so there are issues with Caleb that I'm a little bit concerned about. The hesitancy, still having the high time to throw, being a little gun-shy in certain situations, not looking very comfortable. Now, obviously, Bears fans who might be yelling at me, I totally understand. Coaching goes into this. We saw flashes of it when Thomas Brown was able to come in as the offensive coordinator. And so I am not saying that the book is out on Caleb Williams at all whatsoever. But the reason why, just truthfully, I would go Jayden Daniels over Caleb Williams is because it's the unquantifiable part of scouting that Jayden has already showed me that Caleb just hasn't. He's confident. He's completely confident in who he is as a player, even when it hasn't been at its very highs. Jayden is still a damn good quarterback and still confident in who he is as a quarterback. I see hesitancy everywhere from Caleb. And can you make reasons why that would be the case? 100%. But if I don't have to worry about with Jayden, and I've already seen really high play from him on the football field and just quarterbacking in general, It's really hard for me to not pick that. So you took Caleb Williams at number 1 here for the Bears. I'm very clearly going with Jayden Daniels again for the Commanders because to me, it's a very easy 1-2 here. We could have flipped this one, and I probably would have been fine with it. In fact, when we went into this exercise, I thought that's what we were going to do. But Jayden's just so confident, I can't get away from how he has played in that regard.
I mean, you definitely bring up really good points, and there's no doubt that Daniels has played well. I mean, I think that you've seen stretches of play from him where I feel like he has seemed a little bit uncertain and hesitant in that stretch of games Washington was losing, and you can debate whether the injury is part of that. The Commanders have obviously been adamant that he was completely 100% healthy, and that wasn't part of it. And maybe that's the case. I'm not necessarily doubting them. I think it'll be very telling how the season finishes for Jayden Daniels, and if they get into the playoffs, how well he plays in that environment. Not that you need him to light the world on fire as a rookie, but when the season started, it didn't look like it was going to be close. And so the fact that over the last 6 weeks or so it's become closer, I think, in terms of this debate, has left the door open to me to say, okay, yeah, I still think Caleb Williams can end up being the best quarterback from this class. I feel less confident in that, certainly, than I did during the pre-draft process, so I am very open to the fact that it might be Daniels here at 1. But it's an interesting debate, and it brings us to number 3. And I'm just gonna, this is again probably not gonna be what you would do, but I think I'm still gonna go with Drake Maye here to the Patriots.
Oh,
we're gonna keep this.
That's 100% what I would do. That was the one that I knew we were gonna stick with. Whether we were gonna flip the 2 at 1 and 2 or not. Drake Maye's looked sick, but I don't want to take your pick here. This is your Drake Maye explanation.
Well, I mean. Yeah, I thought maybe I think there's definitely a discussion for Bo Nix at number 3, and there wasn't in my mind pre-draft. So in that way, a lot has changed, I think. And I think it needs to be pointed out that that's the case. However, I still feel like Drake Maye has played well in the worst situation in the NFL, I think. I don't think the coaching or the talent around him has been good, and I think he has been the best part of a really bad situation. That doesn't mean he'll be a great part of a good situation in the future at all, but it just keeps him that hope open for me that he could eventually become that type of a player. And since I liked him pre-draft so much more than I like Nix, I still feel inclined to those priors, given the fact that I don't think enough has changed to move me off of that position. Now, if you're asking me who's had a better season this year, yeah, like I said, I think that is not the conversation for Drake Maye. I think the conversation for him is more like, do you feel what the future can hold is still as exciting as you did at one time? And I am more excited about Bo Nix than I've ever been, but I probably will still have more questions and want to continue to see him. I mean, I think Sean Payton has done some really good things, and the exciting thing about Nix to me is that he has mentally, I think, handled the workload, whereas early in the season it looked like it might break him. He has really responded and mentally handled that really well. And so, yeah, some big tests coming up for him, but I think definitely that is a conversation now where it would not have been preseason.
No, I'm with you 100%. This is an example of, okay, we're doing a redraft 14 weeks into rookie seasons for a lot of these guys. When we talked about the mix of okay, how much do you weigh priors versus what you have seen? This is an example here with Drake Maye where you have to heavily weigh the priors, because what was he going to show you in New England beyond what he has shown you this year? It was never going to look more pretty than this. And some people obviously would push back on the same conversation that we just had about Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels, how I would have taken Jayden Daniels at 1 and you took Caleb. You could have a little bit of that as well. With New England, I think that it's absolutely a case where I think Drake Maye is fantastic. He was my number 2 overall quarterback in last year's class. Him being the pick here at number 3, I was pretty confident when I was running through this in my mind of how this is going to go, which, by the way, folks, we did not do this before the show. We're not reading off of a sheet. We have a sheet that we're going off of a pool of players, but we did not do this. This is a live thing that we are doing here on this show. So I agree with you. Drake Maye, I think, has to go number 3. Number 4 is where I switch it up.
Here we go.
Number 4 is where it gets very interesting. So the Arizona Cardinals took Marvin Harrison Jr. And there's debate as to you could change this pick even if you were staying at wide receiver. Right? You could change this pick for Malik Nabers. You could change this pick for Brian Thomas Jr. Ultimately, I am changing this pick, but I'm changing the pick entirely from the position. I'm taking Jared Verse. I'm taking Verse at number 4.
Whoa.
I'm taking Jared Verse at number 4 because when I look at the Arizona Cardinals, the defensive line, getting pressure, is the thing that they need to do the most. And even though, sure, they would like to upgrade more on the interior defensive line, Verse has been so damn good, and his power has been so unbelievably impressive this season that For as good as these other wide receivers are, I'm not saying that Arizona wouldn't need a wide receiver at some point in time, but I can get a good wide receiver basically any year. Jared Verse and what he is doing with the Rams is nuts. And they're putting him in great positions to succeed. I understand that. But if I'm redrafting for the Cardinals, thinking about their defensive line needs, I know they've got some players along the defensive line. And again, the edge rush room hasn't been the room that's been the lightest for them when it comes to production. But Verse is different. I think Verse is going to be an animal in this league for years to come. I'm taking Verse at 4.
I love it. I really do. I love it. I think it's a great pick. It puts me in a tough situation here because I've got a lot of good players on the board for the Chargers. To me, the two players that I'm trying to decide between, actually, I mean, three to be fair, like the pick that they actually made, Joe Alt, would be a great pick here. Continues, looks like the best tackle in the draft. Is exactly what they drafted. I think they're very happy with that pick for sure. But I can't. I already did 2 chalk picks. I'm not picking another one like that. And even though that pick makes a lot of sense on paper, I go back to who I think have been 2 of the best players in this class at their positions in Malik Nabers and Brock Bowers. And I think at this point, if you're asking me who ends up with the best career out of this group, I still think it's Malik Nabers. And I want to see Malik Nabers with Justin Herbert. That's what I wanted pre-draft, and I've got a chance to do it now, and nothing about the way they've played this season has deterred me from that. But that vertical speed and ability to get open, I think we've seen a version of it with Ladd McConkey, and obviously this isn't revisionist. I'm not saying they don't draft Ladd McConkey. We'll see if he goes in these top 20s if they do this. That's a totally different conversation for a different podcast maybe, but I'm just saying, given what's on the board here, the Chargers don't have Ladd McConkey at this point in time.
Right.
I would take Malik Nabers and think that he's going to have a better career, but Bowers or Alt could be great picks here as well.
The ultimate debate pre-draft of who it was going to be for the Chargers between Malik Nabers and Joe Alt. I think it's between the 2 guys that you mentioned, Brock Bowers, Malik Nabers, and obviously picking Joe Alt, who has been fantastic for them. And I got no problem if people were like, no, we'd stick with Alt. I'd be like, great, sounds good, love it. Brock Bowers also would be pretty unique, pretty special, and I think that he would absolutely be eating in this offense as well. I think I might have leaned Bowers over Nabers, even for as much as I love Malik Nabers. I think I might have, I don't know, I might have leaned Brock Bowers.
You could definitely go either way. Both these guys would be unbelievable.
I know.
You think about what the Chargers want to do offensively. Yeah, I mean, they've even changed as the year's gone on, and I think Bowers would be a really good fit. So it is really a tough call between the 2 of them.
So now we got the Giants, who were on the clock at number 6 last year. And, they kind of stink at corner. And Quinyon Mitchell.
This is one of the hardest picks, dude.
Quinyon Mitchell certainly could have been a selection here. You took Malik Nabers off the board, but, Marvin Harrison Jr. is still here. Brian Thomas Jr. is still here. I mean, think of this wide receiver room without Malik Nabers. It's nothing. Brock Bowers is still here. Obviously, he could be a fantastic pick. Something along the offensive line, I think, would have been really important, but it is all secondary to quarterback. And I understand at the time they were rolling with Daniel Jones, and I get it. This is obviously a hindsight thing, but now that Jones is not even on the team anymore, I'm taking Bo Nix. I'm taking Bo Nix here at number 6. I think you have to. There are so many different directions that the Giants could go. The roster is not nearly as good as we thought that it was going to be, and Nix has played incredibly well for the Denver Broncos. Now, does he play as well for the Giants with Brian Daboll in that current situation as he does with Denver and Sean Payton? I'm going to say no. He's not having the same exact year, but very clearly we're watching Bo Nix play at a high NFL level, so we know with the benefit of hindsight that is possible from him. So even if you weren't getting that from him this year in New York, you know that you could get something like that, and even beyond. Obviously, as Bo Nix, we're going to see him grow with the Denver Broncos. We've already seen what he is capable of, or at least the direction that he is capable of going. So to me, a lot of different You could go corner. They desperately need corner. Like I said, an offensive weapon. Certainly they drafted Malik Nabers for a reason. The offensive line could use a little bit more solidifying, but it's Bo Nix. It's got to be Bo Nix at number 6, in my opinion.
I'm glad it was you that made the pick, but you're right. There's just because it's hard because Bowers would be so good there. Joe and Marvin Harrison Jr. But yeah, think about where the Giants would be at if Bo Nix looked like a competent quarterback for them, and how much different we'd feel about the direction of their franchise and the stability of their current front office / coaching staff if that were the case. So That's not the case with any other player. We just talked about Nabers, and that he's there and he's played well, and it's not made that kind of a difference. And so, yeah, you really have to take the chance, even if you don't think Nix ends up as this franchise quarterback. Just the way he's looked this year has been good enough where you have to take that chance. Titans at 7. This is tricky. Two really good players stand out, Joe Alt and Brock Bowers. Obviously, they needed offensive line help like crazy last year. If I were making a need-based pick, I would take Joe Alt, but I'm not. Brock Bowers might be the best player in this class, and the Titans are picking at 7.
Wow.
And it's a rebuild. It's a rebuild. Like you're not going to be good this year anyway. You just got to take a player who's going to be potentially a franchise changer if he's on the board at this point. And just the way it fell with quarterbacks, you might be getting, and obviously versus Nabers are great, but you might be getting the best player in this entire draft at number 7, and you just can't pass up on that opportunity, in my opinion.
I can't believe you didn't pick Alt.
I mean, I know from a need perspective it's what they need, but again, it's not about winning this year to be for the Titans. Or they can pick a tackle later in the draft, but it's just about what sets my franchise up long term. And if I could potentially get the player that I know now might be the best player in this class at 7, like you have to. I think Ald is a really good player. Is he ever going to be the best tackle in the league? And even if he is, how much does that move the needle versus just like a solid starter at that position compared to having a top, look at the top tight ends in the NFL every year playing Super Bowls. It's a huge needle-moving position, in my opinion. When you got one of the elite guys, there's just hardly any elite guys.
I'm shocked you didn't pick all. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I can't really push back on your argument here. I'm just shocked you went Alt because now we're at pick 8, and I'm not going to pick Alt for the Falcons. I'm so tempted.
Probably should. Caleb McGarry struggled.
I guess I could pick.
Maybe you should pick Michael Penix. You got to think about the future.
Dude, so here's the tough part about the Falcons. For as limited as Kirk Cousins looks at this point, can you imagine if they only had Kirk Cousins and nothing else? And then again, using hindsight, not only talking about players that we've seen in the NFL this year, but also evaluating the upcoming quarterback class. If they only had Kirk Cousins and they weren't going to be in range for any of these good quarterbacks that were coming up, might be a little tough. It's a tough sell. I actually thought about potentially going with one of the quarterbacks here at number 8, as crazy as that was on draft night, just because of how Kirk Cousins has looked at sometimes. But I'm not.
I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking about the wide receivers, aren't you?
No. If anything, it's Joe Alt versus Laiatu Latu. That's what it has to be.
You're still thinking about Joe Alt.
Yeah. If anything, it has to be that. I'm going to... God, Joe Alt's been so good. You know what? All right. What's Caleb McGarry's contract?
I mean, it doesn't matter.
No, it does matter. It does matter, all right? Damn it.
I just mean he's not, locked in forever. You can cut him. Or trade him or whatever.
Oh, he's got 1 year left?
Yeah.
Who
knew Caleb McGarry would be your sticking point? You're just trying to draft good players. Who's going to... You think about the Falcons, though. They are more of a win-now window than the situation I just explained with the Titans, at least.
Hold on. I'm checking one more thing. Checking it. Hold on. Wait.
I already know I'm picking for the Bears.
All right, I had Joe Alt ranked 5. I had Laiatu Latu ranked 10.
I mean, Latu looks good.
No, I'm picking Latu. No, I'm picking Latu. Their pass rush is so bad. I entertained other ideas. I explored all options, and we got to where we needed to be at the end, where it should have been all along. They should have picked Laiatu Latu at 8 last year, and here we are having them redraft. I can't have them passing over Laiatu in my own reality. So Laiatu Latu to the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, obviously would make a huge difference for them if they had a pass rusher of his caliber on their team. Now it's probably the biggest thing holding them back, that and just the limited quarterback play / limited offense for the fact that Cousins can't move. So totally get that pick completely. I think some people might be surprised by it. I would watch Laiatu Latu over the last 6 weeks before you rush to judgment. He looks like he's going to be a difference-making player. I still think, if I'm betting I still think he might be the best edge from this class. As good as Jared Verse has been, I still wonder about the translation to production with Latu's game eventually being better, but we'll see. The Bears are picking a 9th, and there's only one player in this class. There's only 2 players in this class. Bowers is one of them, and the other one that have been the best players, among the best players at their position group this season as rookies. And the other one is Zach Frazier. So I don't care if it's a position of value, all that kind of stuff. I don't care.
Whoa!
Doesn't matter to me.
Whoa!
The Bears, first of all, they already had tackles that they felt like they were going to want to develop. And I mean, they just drafted Darnell Wright. So Joe Alt makes a little bit less sense for them maybe because of that. They have the worst starting center in the NFL. He has been absolutely atrocious. They have had so many struggles because of that with Coleman Shelton.
You think he's the worst center? Wow. You think he's the worst starting center in the NFL?
He is brutal. He's brutal.
Boy. Okay.
So I think so many of their issues stem from that, especially early in the season. If you watch him just get walked back every play into Caleb Williams' lap and just generally, just get ran over in the run game, and having a guy like Frazier, a stabilizing force, immediately one of the best centers in the league in the middle of your offense. I mean, we were talking about just trying to add stabilizing, best players available, culture, transformer type of players to a team that doesn't have that. I mean, you can obviously go wide receiver here, and there's plenty of good options. And Odunze, I think, will be a good player for them. You could go alt for sure. He'd be a good player for them. But to me, Zach Frazier's been the best offensive lineman in this class, and it's a massive position of need for the Bears.
Positional importance be damned.
Yep, get it out of here.
I do agree, though. I think that I think center is categorized as a low priority position, but I feel like just a lot of the best offensive lines in the NFL have great centers, kind of like what you talked about with tight ends. Like a lot of these great offensive lines, they've got really good centers in the middle, and I think it's really, really important. And maybe not number 9 overall in a stacked draft class, but I think there is something to what you're talking about emphasizing a player who is playing as well as Zach Frazier has played as a rookie and the things that he can do there. I mean, like, look at how Creed Humphrey has totally. I'm not taking anything away from Joe Thuney or Trey Smith. I'm really not, but like, Creed Humphrey in the middle of that, I mean, he's truly the rock of what's going on in the middle of the best interior offensive line in the NFL. And so you're hoping to set that up, certainly with Chicago Bears, who were looking at offensive line as a potential need for them again, especially along the interior going into this year. So, man, a little crazy to see him at number 9 overall, but hey.
I knew that one would get you.
Hey, that one got me. That one got me. Vikings, I think you're in a great spot here at number 10. So they take J.J. McCarthy. I'm not drafting J.J. McCarthy or any quarterback because I am now of the opinion that they should re-sign Sam Darnold. Like that, I've said this on multiple shows now, so anybody that's re-listening is probably sick of hearing me saying it, but you are hoping that J.J. McCarthy can someday be what Sam Darnold already is. And of course, sure, I mean, like, if you think McCarthy's going to be even better than that, like, okay, but like Sam's playing at such an incredibly high level. He's been a top 10 quarterback this season. For plenty of games, he's looked like a top 5 quarterback. And you look at the Vikings team and how well they're playing, this dude could legitimately get you to a conference championship game or maybe even a Super Bowl. If that's going to be the case, how do you move on from that player? How do you go, yeah, but we drafted a quarterback at 10 overall, so we're going to move on from this quarterback that is playing really well? Because I don't think he's in the same conversation of the other like game manager type of quarterbacks that were just around stacked teams. I think the Vikings are good, and I think Sam Darnold is good. So it's really hard for me, for them clearly in a winning window right now with him, to move on from him. So I'm not going to go a quarterback here. I'm going to roll with Sam Darnold because I think that they're going to give him a contract extension. And I'm going to draft a guy who I think has been one of the best rookies this season at number 10 overall in Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, Mitchell has just been an absolute stud for the Philadelphia Eagles at outside corner. And you look at a couple of, Stephon Gilmore's a free agent. Byron Murphy's a free agent. Like, they got a lot of free agents at their cornerback spot. And when I do mock drafts for them, I often look at corner in the first round because of how much they could potentially lose this upcoming offseason. If they had Quinyon Mitchell, I mean, they'd be feeling so good about themselves right now. So him going number 10 overall, I think is a reflection of how well he is playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. And also it's a perfect spot given sort of what has happened with the Minnesota Vikings. So they get Quinyon at 10 here.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I mean, the Vikings are kind of a unique, if we get into the real weeds of it with scheme and everything, they're kind of a unique team in that Flores just fits everybody to what he does. And so, they haven't had this massive investment at cornerback, and that's one of the reasons why. So that part of it could get interesting if we go down that little rabbit trail. But if you're just talking about player with a team that could absolutely utilize him and would be a good fit, to be honest, with what they do, I love that pick. I think it's a great fit with the Vikings. With the Jets at 11, this is interesting because every wide receiver except for Nabers is here. Bowers is obviously off the board, and they could absolutely have used that. And then all the offensive tackles are here. And we didn't know this at the time. The Jets obviously took an offensive tackle. We didn't know this at the time, but Tyron Smith was pretty cooked. And now that I know that, and operating from that premise a little bit, I think you have to take Joe Alt here. I mean, the fact that he's still on the board at 11, like you said, the quarterbacks going even higher now have pushed him down the board to a degree. And so I feel like if you are the Jets, some of these wide receivers could move the needle, but ultimately, even when they got more talent there, it didn't matter because they haven't been able to protect consistently. And so if you have a chance to get the best tackle in the draft at 11 and get a franchise left tackle, right tackle, wherever you want to use them, be on the left side, I guess, with the Jets, then I think you're in a great spot to do that here. And you pretty much have to do it, even if there are other interesting things on the board. Quarterback could be an interesting direction if you were willing to go there with the Jets, I think, at 11. But I don't know if we should save that for another time or not, Trev.
Yeah, I wouldn't take quarterback here for the Jets.
Trying to operate within the theory of what they were trying to be as a team.
But obviously, I did the hindsight thing with the Giants pick at number 6, but also I believed in Daniel Jones much less than I believed in Aaron Rodgers with the Jets, and they need offensive line anyways. Like the Olu pick was still a good pick for them, even though they could have gone with Brock Bowers. Like the Olu pick was a good pick because they knew they were going to need offensive tackle no matter what, whether it was this upcoming year, whether it was the year after that. And so, especially with Joe Alt still on the board, this is, given what they could do, this is still a relatively easy pick for me. So I agree with you here. I think that this one makes the most sense. Broncos now. Knicks off the board. The only quarterbacks that we have are J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix. I am going to go with J.J. McCarthy. I'm going to take McCarthy here. McCarthy was higher on my board than Michael Penix was. The Broncos desperately needed a quarterback at the time, so I think that this still makes sense. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that J.J. would be great with Sean Payton. I think that would also be really
I could definitely
nice,
see that.
I think
I like J.J. McCarthy pre-draft, so you don't have to sell me.
So I think that he is. This still works out for Broncos fans who might have been watching this, who watched me, take Bo Nix at number 6 overall, who might not be too happy about it. I think you got to be relatively happy with sitting here at number 12 and getting J.J. McCarthy in a redraft because who knows? Obviously, it's all speculation, but I genuinely believe that J.J. McCarthy could have similar success to what Bo Nix has been able to have. I think that Nix's experience throughout college and how many years that he was a starter sort of go into his ability to hit the ground running and especially struggle early, but then recoup from that and stabilize. And then the second half of the year, he's been really good. So JJ would have been, I think, a longer learning curve, but I think the potential of what you could have gotten and the highs that you've gotten out of Bo Nix still would have existed in McCarthy. So McCarthy going to the Broncos there at number 12.
Yeah, totally fine pick. I mean, obviously him being injured, there's not much to add to it in terms of analysis standpoint. We don't know anymore, so if you liked him pre-draft, you probably think that this is a good spot for him. So I completely agree. I think that would be a great pick for them, given the fact that they've got no shot at Knicks in a redraft. I'm going to go Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Raiders at number 13. I know I could go quarterback here for sure, and obviously that would make sense. And maybe it's just worth it for them because they have just absolutely zero answer there at all. But I just wasn't a big Penix fan pre-draft, and so I don't really want to come off those priors to the degree that I'm taking him in the first round. We just haven't really seen him play, so no real reason for me to change my mind on that one. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., though, I mean, I know it's not been maybe the rookie season many hoped. He's still playing pretty freaking good football. Like, I think we're maybe overreacting a little bit that he isn't, the franchise-changing Justin Jefferson type of player right away. I still think he's been a really good player for them, and I think that for the Cardinals, and I still think, I mean, you looking about the Raiders, and you're just like, okay, well, they're a total rebuild, right? They have like 2-3 good players, and then everything else is from the ground up, basically. And so you just need best players available, positions of need, and I feel like he's a guy that can come in and potentially be that player. I didn't know if we would get to a point where you would take Brian Thomas or Marvin Harrison, and I was curious to see what order you would go in. I didn't know if you still feel like, no, it's definitely Harrison, or because I know you're a big Brian Thomas guy. I didn't know if you'd be conflicted on that.
No, I'd still take Marvin Harrison Jr. over Brian Thomas. For as good as Brian Thomas has been, truly, he's been fantastic for the Jags this season, and honestly, like a savior in a lot of ways for them in their passing game. I know it hasn't amounted to wins or a lot of offensive success, but he's been great. I still would have taken Marvin Harrison Jr. This also would have been my pick too here for the Raiders. The Saints.
Talk about a franchise that needs to hit on a key position group.
This is interesting for me. Their defensive line's terrible.
Yeah.
Byron Murphy, Johnny Newton, both those guys were really high on my pre-draft rankings. They could really use good interior defensive line players.
As you're thinking about this, just a side note on those guys, the hard thing with defensive line is I like this defensive line class, and I believe it's going to end up being a good interior defensive line class. I really liked it. It has been a pretty uneven start to the year for that class, like start to careers, I should say, for that class. I think Murphy looked good in the injury, and he's been okay. He's been solid. Newton's had better moments since John Allen went down, but he just does not look as explosive as the player he was in college. That foot was definitely, that was the reason he fell on draft day. And so, obviously that was a huge part of the evaluation that we didn't have access to before the draft. I think Fisk has the numbers. I watched the tape and I'm like, it's a lot of hit or miss, and so Chris Jenkins has had some moments as the year's gone on. He's also had some awful moments. Sweat is a good run defender, but the passer stuff. So I think it's a challenge to contextualize this interior defensive line class because I really did like it pre-draft, and it hasn't been the hottest start for the group in their rookie seasons.
Then we look at offensive line. The defensive line's been terrible, but certainly with hindsight involved, Ryan Ramczyk certainly being somebody who is now looks like he could just be retiring.
Yeah.
They have Taliese Fuaga. Trevor Penning has played well at times, but it's certainly just been the up and down Trevor Penning experience. Of the offensive linemen that are left on the board, I had Taliese Fuaga, the next highest on the list, and I actually still think that's the right pick for them. For as much as they have defensive line struggles, I'm going to stick with Taliese Fuaga here for the Saints and make sure that they get an offensive tackle. Because without Fuaga, to me, what do they have? You have two massive issues at offensive tackle then if that's the case, if you don't have Taliese Fuaga or just some offensive lineman in there. So I think I'm actually going to keep this pick the same and go Fuaga for the Saints.
Yeah, I think it really is tackle for the Saints. I do feel good about that. It's just which one did you have next? Who do you think's best? This year, I don't think there's been, Fautanu, who was next for me, that's who I would have taken, hasn't played really because of an injury. Latham and Fuaga have been, fairly even. I think Fuaga has bounced back a little bit after a real rough stretch. And, I think Fashanu's looked better on the left side, but I don't think anybody feels like this is a done deal at this position. Mims is playing now and playing solid ball. So very much like quarterback, I think you can kind of talk yourself in any order for these tackles still. Alta's been the clear best guy, which he was the first one drafted, so that makes sense. He's been the clear best guy this season. After that, I think it's been really a pretty consistent collection of pretty, there's highs and lows with the group. I don't think anybody's been a disaster per se, outside of maybe Somatia, but he was a later pick. But I think that there's still a lot of questions to be answered about which one of these guys can hit. So if you had Fuaga next pre-draft, then that pick makes a ton of sense. Colts are up at 15, and it's funny because they could go a couple directions with this, but I really feel like the offensive line, which still seems pretty loaded in terms of the board, is not the direction they'd go. And I think about Anthony Richardson, and I imagine him with Brian Thomas, and I just can't help myself. This seems like one of the best fits ever.
Holy cow, I didn't even think of that.
It's just so fun. You got to do it. It's rule of fun. So there's a lot of players that could make sense for them. By the way, Ladd McConkey has probably been the best rookie receiver this season. So, he's still on the board, and that could be a great pick. But they have a more similar player to that and Josh Downs, I think. And so I like Brian Thomas a lot for the Colts in terms of what he can provide, sort of being what they hoped in a lot of ways, I think, that Adonai Mitchell would be, and maybe still will be at some point. We don't know. Just hasn't really panned out that way this season. So obviously with Alec Pierce, there may be some redundancy, but Thomas's ceiling being so much higher, I think that even though this is a position that they're, turned out to be better at, I think, than people thought pre-draft, I think I'd still take a player like that to pair with Richardson.
Oh, I didn't even think of Brian Thomas Jr. here for the Colts. Dude, that's so perfect. Alec Pierce is pissed. Man's getting run out of town. Doesn't even have a job anymore.
He's good, too, and he just doesn't even matter because he's not Brian Thomas.
He's just not Brian Thomas Jr. Oh, man. This is good. So, obviously, they took Laiatu Latu here in the first round when he fell to them. No Brock Bowers was on the board, so couldn't really tempt them in that regard. But, yeah, given the fact that what Richardson's skill set is, I like that one. I do like that one. I would have been tempted by Cooper Dejean I think that he plays in the slot certainly for the Philadelphia Eagles, but I think he could have played on the outside for the Colts. And I think the cornerback is a big area of need that they have to get better. So the way that Dejean has played this season, I'm sort of tempted by him. But you're right, rule of fun, Brian Thomas on the end of those Anthony Richardson bombs does sound pretty good. So the Seattle Seahawks at 16, they ended up taking Byron Murphy II. He is still here, so I think that pick could make sense for them. But man, when you look at the Seahawks' struggles this year, they have given up so many pressures on their right side of the line of scrimmage. And Abraham Lucas, I know he's back out there and he's played this season, but the knee injury still really worries me with him long term. Troy Fautanu, I know he got hurt, so we haven't seen him this season, but in this alternate reality, maybe he's not getting hurt. So I'm gonna take the other tackle. I'm gonna go with Troy Fautanu because he could either play that right tackle spot for me, or, if Abe Lucas comes back and the knee's great and we feel great about him and long-term he's good to go, you could play Fautanu at guard as well. And they lost, obviously, some interior players from free agency last year. And so Fautanu, to me, makes a ton of sense. One, he gets to stay in Washington, so he gets to stay close to home. Low moving costs, as we say on NFLSC. You love that. The owner loves that anytime that they can save a little bit of money. And I just think he's a very versatile, really talented offensive line piece. So whether it's at right tackle, whether it's one of the guard spots, I'm going to go with Fautanu here for the Seahawks at number 16.
So the Vikings' second pick in this draft is next for me. You already took Quinyon Mitchell.
Hold on,
so
wait. I have a proposition for you.
Yes.
Do you want to do the Jags here instead? Because the Jags were the team that traded back to 23. And the Vikings, we already had the Vikings pick in there. So technically the Jags would have picked at 17 prior to the draft. And that's the only team that would have been in the top 20 that we could actually get into the top 20. Because it would have made sense.
That's true. We could. How about we do this? How about we just say I just tell you who I pick for both teams?
Okay, it's fine. Fine with me. Works.
I would pick, given what's on the board here for the Jaguars, I would pick McConkey. You could make a real good argument for Graham Barton because Mitch Morse wasn't what people hoped he would be, but at the time you weren't thinking that necessarily, and so. I know there's some revisionist stuff to this. It's just part of the exercise, but I would go McConkey. I think he's that good. Just been dynamic, open all levels of the field. Has just been such a comfort for Herbert, and I think would be the same for Lawrence. For Minnesota, who's here, I would go, and maybe we can just take this player off the board. I would go Byron Murphy here. And remember, I was a Johnny Newton guy pre-draft, but just given what I know now about the foot and just watching him move this season and not looking the same as he looked in college, as much as I love Newton pre-draft, I love Murphy too. And just Murphy looking healthier and looking like a more explosive player, even though there's been some ups and downs against the run, I think I would still roll those dice with Murphy here. And the Vikings just need difference makers up front. I mean, you could go McConkey for Minnesota too, but at the time, Jordan Addison, I don't know if, we didn't know about the legal stuff. And he's obviously jumped out, and since that point, I think he's jumped back to over the second half of the season. He's had a much better campaign. So I think I would go Byron Murphy here and just give them what I think is the best defensive lineman left in the draft. Okay, well, I am going to rebuke that, and because the player that I want for the Bengals, who are picking next, is Byron Murphy II. So I'm going to say we'll take McConkey off
that we're rolling with Jacksonville getting the 17th pick, and it's our show, damn it. And I have a better direct connection to the producer, who's the one who's running this whole show. So we're going to say that Jacksonville is staying at 17 like they were when the draft began, because there was no reason to trade back, because there was no Dallas Turner for the Vikings to be enticed by. I mean, I guess they could have still traded up for Dallas Turner, but we didn't have them take Dallas Turner. So you go with Ladd McConkey for the Jags, who were originally picking at number 17, and that makes a perfect pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, honestly, with Byron Murphy being the pick here at number 18. We have seen that, okay, DJ Reader now no longer being in the middle of that Cincinnati defensive line it's just been a terrible ripple effect. I'm not saying that it's been all of that departure from him, but Trey Hendrickson's the only guy on that defensive line. They need somebody else there. Now, they drafted Chris Jenkins, but Chris Jenkins, I think he could be a good football player, as impactful as one of these top first-round guys. Who knows? We'll see. It makes it interesting because they took Amarius Mims in this spot, and they kind of still needed Amarius Mims, and so me no longer giving them Mims here at number 18, perhaps Bengals fans might be like, no, you're robbing one spot just to fill another, and it doesn't actually really help us. So maybe there's no perfect answer anyways, but for as bad as the interior defensive line has looked, I'm going to go with Byron Murphy II here for the Bengals at number 18.
Yeah, that would be a very helpful pick. I mean, I don't know if it'd be helpful as rookie season, but eventually, having a talent like that would be a huge blessing for them. I've got, with my last pick in this exercise, I've got the Rams, and I'm going to go. Did you say Cooper Dejean? Is that what it is? This whole time we've all been saying Cooper Dejean?
Honestly, still don't
Whatever
know.
his name is.
Still don't know. Every time I ask somebody, they say it differently. And I think
okay, I was like, I hope I didn't have it wrong this whole time. Cooper Dejean, whatever your name is.
I think that it's Cooper Dejean, if I'm
okay,
being,
all right. Cooper Dejean, you're an LA Ram. And because the LA Rams need secondary help in the worst way. I think if they had a really good secondary, I mean, it could be a huge difference for them. He could play inside or outside. I think he could be a move around and be a chess piece for them, and they need a player like that. They just haven't really had that. And so I'm going to go Cooper Dejean to the Rams. There were other players I considered. Center has been, shockingly, even though it looked like they had multiple options, been an enigma for them. Bo Limmer's played okay in some respects. There's been some pass protection issues. They've had Jonah Jackson, who they thought could play. Steve Avila was a center at times, and people thought maybe he could. So some of that stuff has been a little bit odd for them, but I am going to go with Dejean at 19.
Okay. All right. That makes sense to get him in the top 20. I like that. We've actually got a little bit of extra time here on the show, so I figured that we could take the exercise back a couple more picks to get to number 23 to make it fair, so the Vikings would be like, wait a second, we wanted the 2 first-round picks, so let's take it to at least 23.
Well, it depends how much I lambaste you if you mess up this Steelers pick at 20.
Oh, shoot, I do pick for the Steelers at 20. All right, okay, so what the hell am I supposed to do here? No Zach Frazier. No Troy Fautanu. Who's left? Who do we got?
I'm not helping you.
All right, we got J.C. Latham still. We got Amarius Mims.
This is kind of a tricky pick. I know who I would take, I think, but this is kind of a tricky pick.
The defensive line is just absolutely goated. So we're not gonna do anything on the defensive line. I could take the linebacker, but I'm not going to.
Not here.
Secondary.
Oh, brother.
Interesting. Could go secondary. I think I gotta go.
They also have terrible wide receivers, other than Pickens.
I was about to say Rome Odunze. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Dominick Puni's been an absolute monster this year, and they would have needed interior offensive line help.
Interesting.
Graham Barton.
He is good. He has been
Graham Barton being here obviously makes a lot of sense for them because they wouldn't have Zach Frazier, so they'd really need that. Man, this is tough.
I think there's it's between 2 players, I think, pretty clearly.
All right, I'm going to take Graham Barton.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's who they would have taken in real life if Frazier wasn't on the board. Obviously, if Fautanu wasn't on the board, because it would have been, pre-Frazier, I feel like, or maybe they were just content waiting. But, I think there was a world in which they would have ended up with Barton, perhaps. But
who was the other
makes a lot of sense, obviously. The other guy I was going to consider was Rome Odunze, right? I mean,
okay, so it was between really Rome Odunze and Graham Barton, and then like Dominick Puni, I think Terran Arnold, maybe even Mike Sainristil, just for the pure vibes. Andrew Phillips, I guess too. I would have thought about with corner, but I do think.
Well, they really need a nickel, and that honestly, my third pick for them would have been Tyke Smith. I think he's been the best nickel in this draft, and I think he's just been outstanding and would be an unbelievable fit.
Okay, all right.
So Miami at 21, they took Chop Robinson here, and they obviously, because all the injuries, needed pass rusher. I actually kind of like Chop, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go back to the offensive line because to me, this is like definitely the biggest need on this team was just going into the season was this position group. And I know they have their throw in a millisecond type offense, and so they're not necessarily, the numbers never look that bad, but when you watch them, man, they got to get nastier. They got to get more talented up front. And so for me, even though I think you could definitely go interior offensive line here, and I love Puni, I think he's been really good, and you could take that spot, and I wouldn't bat an eye. But I'm going to go with the next ranked tackle that I had, who I think has been really good on the left side lately. I didn't watch this past week's game. I know he might have hit some bumps in the road, but I think Olu Fashanu has been pretty good for the Jets. And so I'm going to go with him at 21 of the Dolphins.
Okay, all right. I think the Olu pick makes sense. I was very curious. Did you like Latham pre-draft? Because he's still here. Did you like him?
I liked him. Yeah, I liked him. I didn't love him, but I liked him. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought he was, I think I had a second round grade on him. I thought he was a starter. I thought he'd be better at guard. And he's actually, early on in the year, it looked like he would be in better at guard. And then he's actually improved some really at tackle, I think, in terms of his pass sets. And so I definitely like him. Yeah, I don't know that I consider him like a star, but I do think he can play tackle now. Be a solid player.
So you brought up nickel corners, and we've got the Eagles now up at number 22. Of the corners that are left, like Terrion Arnold's left, but for what they've needed Cooper Dejean, excuse me, or however you want to say it, for the Eagles, I'm going to go Mike Sainristil. Sainristil has been incredible.
Interesting. Okay, so you're still a Sainristil over Tyke Smith, over Andrew
Dude,
Phillips.
I have to be. Sainristil's been incredible. First half of the season was unbelievable, and he was playing outside corner. So he could play outside corner, and he could play inside corner for you. And for as much as I love Tyke Smith, I have to keep Mike Sainristil as like the top guy. I had a second-round grade on him. I was so high on Mike Sainristil. So
I think he's good for sure.
I
think he's good.
And he's big attitude. He's a big attitude guy, which the Eagles would absolutely love.
Yeah, it's just funny because he's barely played in the slot this season, and that was what he was supposed to be. And so I just wonder, what was that?
He can't play in the slot. We know.
Oh, I think he can. Yeah, for sure. Obviously, it was a rough start to the year, but it was just his first 2 games that he played in the slot basically, and then he's been outside since then. So anyway, it's just interesting because if you think about specifically the Dejean role, then I feel like are you drafting a true nickel or are you drafting? But either way, I think Sainristil is a really good player who helps your team for sure. Vikings at 23. So now this is the second pick. So they took Quinyon Mitchell, right? So now I need defensive line help, but I'm gonna be honest, I just am not that confident in Dallas Turner. I wasn't that confident in him pre-draft, and I definitely feel less confident now at this point. I love Johnny Newton, as I said, but it just hasn't looked like the same player to me in college. So I'm not touching the defensive line group. I'm not touching linebacker. We haven't even mentioned safety, which we raved about 8 weeks ago on the pod, and then they've all fallen off since then. Basically,
it's true.
It's true. The class has regressed to the mean. We should have waited. We should have been patient. So the Vikings are up here, and obviously their tackle pairing is already one of the best in the league. Darrisaw's hurt now, obviously, but you think about what adding Puni to that group could look like. It seems pretty exciting to me to think about that possibility.
It's true.
Also, adding another secondary piece could be fun, but since they already did that, I think I am going to go Puni here and throw him in. Powers Johnson's played a lot better lately, and I liked him pre-draft, so that's another pick that could be really good because he could kick the center once they're finally done with Bradbury, but I either one of those I'm fine with. But I think Puni's nastiness combined with the rest of the group replacing what the Ed Ingram spot, it could be a huge upgrade for them.
There we go. That is the redraft of the first 23. We thought we were only going to give you 20, but because we love you guys, we gave you the 3 extra. It started off with some chalk at the very top of the draft with Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye going in the same spots, but Jared Verse to the Cardinals, Bo Nix to the Giants, Brock Bowers to the Titans, Quinyon Mitchell to the Vikings. We're getting a center top 10, Zach Frazier going to the Falcons there. I mean, this is a lot of fun. John, is there 1 or 2 picks, just really quick, because we got to get out of here, but really any of the new spots that you absolutely loved?
I mean, I just think that the Bears getting a player like Frazier would be a franchise changer for them, and the Titans maybe getting the best player in the draft in Bowers at 7. Those were probably 2 of my favorite ones to link up. And then just the whole Brian Thomas-Richardson connection. If that can actually hit, would be a blast to watch.
Well, that'd be so much fun. Appreciate everybody watching and listening. This was a ton of fun for us. Get your comments and thoughts in on the PFF YouTube channel when you find this show. We would love to hear from you and some of these new connections with a lot of these players. For Jon Ledyard, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week.